Academy for Social Change presents the Department of Labor. Charlotte, who is 16 years old, just started her first job as a cashier at her local grocery store in Pennsylvania. However, when she arrives on her first day, her supervisor tells her that she will not be allowed to take any breaks during her 8-hour weekend shift. By the end of her second week, Charlotte is exhausted, and upon seeing her first paycheck, it only gets worse. Instead of the amount she expected, her employer is only paying her $4 an hour. Charlotte's work situation isn't just unfair, it's illegal. While there is no federal law that mandates break periods, most states have laws that require breaks or rest periods for minors working long shifts, including Pennsylvania. Additionally, $4 an hour is below the federal minimum wage and the youth minimum wage, which as of 2020 was $7.25 an hour and $4.25 an hour, respectively. In ignoring these laws, Charlotte's employer can be investigated, fined, and even imprisoned by the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor, or DOL, is a federal executive department and a unit of the executive branch. The president appoints its secretary, who also serves in the cabinet, to advise the president. Since its establishment in its current form in 1913, the purpose of the DOL is to improve working conditions, advance employment opportunities, and assure work-related benefits and rights. The DOL administers and enforces over 180 federal laws and thousands more federal regulations to achieve this goal. While the Department of Labor and Commerce was established in 1903, it wasn't until March 4, 1913, the last day of his presidency, that President William Howard Taft signed a bill elevating the Department of Labor to a cabinet-level department. The department was the result of 50 years of campaigning by organized labor to have a voice in the cabinet. In 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt appointed Frances Perkins as Secretary of Department of Labor, the first woman to ever serve in the cabinet. Perkins believed that the government had a significant role to play in helping address the unemployment caused by the Great Depression. She was involved in many of President Roosevelt's New Deal policies to help with unemployment, such as the Civilian Conservation Corps, which sent young employed men to rural areas for conservation projects like building telephone poles and planting trees. However, one of her most substantial contributions was the Social Security Act. The act passed in 1935 and ensured a pension plan for the elderly and aid for dependent mothers and people with physical disabilities. Additionally, the DOL administered the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, which set a federal minimum wage of 25 cents an hour and a maximum work week of 40 hours for most workers in manufacturing. Since 1938, the government has extended coverage under this act to most salaried workers and raised the minimum wage multiple times. Because of the DOL's many roles and responsibilities, the department has 28 different specialized agencies and offices. For instance, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration enforces work safety standards and provides job training and education. The Wage and Hour Division imposes the federal minimum wage, child labor requirements, and overtime pay, as well as ensuring those who go on leave because of a medical or family issue are protected. In addition to the work the federal DOL does, each state has its own Department of Labor, which enforces state labor laws. In states where the minimum wage is higher than the federal minimum wage, workers are entitled to that state's minimum wage. While states can set their own minimum wage, any workers covered under the Fair Labor Standards Act are entitled to the highest minimum wage rate. The Fair Labor Standards Act applies to all people who work for employers that either make at least $500,000 in annual sales or who engage in interstate commerce, which covers nearly all workers. However, there are exceptions. The youth minimum wage applies to all people under 20 years old and allows employers to pay them at a lower rate for 90 calendar days after they start working. Additionally, people with disabilities, full-time students, and tipped workers can all be paid less than minimum wage. While the Department of Labor enforces workforce regulations, it has its issues. A report from the Brennan Center for Justice in 2005 found that from 1975 to 2004, the DOL's enforcement resources and activities have remained static or decreased. At the same time, the workforce has expanded. Together, these two facts mean that the DOL's ability to enforce these regulations has decreased. There is also a persisting problem of discrimination within the workforce against people of color, people with disabilities, LGBTQ+ people, and women, despite federal laws against workplace discrimination. At some point in your life, you're probably going to have to get a job, and knowing your rights as a worker will be beneficial. The DOL is far from perfect, but it is still a valuable resource for workers struggling to understand their rights or seek justice for a violation. Now it's your turn to think further. If you could create a labor law, what would it be? What issues would it address, and why do you think these issues are especially pressing?